Is. There you are. There you are.
Can you see me now?
We can see you now.
Okay, I'm using my iPhone.
Okay.
Something's just wrong with the computer, but I will use my iPhone.
Okay. As long as it works for you. I'm sorry about that. I know you and Mike were going to try to use a couple of minutes for practice time, but it's going to be what it's going to be at this point.
Right. I'm here.
It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with the county's new police chief, Colonel Peter Newsham. We're delighted to have you with us, Chief Newsham. In terms of our program tonight, Ruth Anderson is going to serve as our moderator. I will introduce Ruth, then Ruth will introduce it with a great deal more detail, the chief. The chief will speak to us for a few minutes, 15, 20 maybe, and then we will bombard him with all kinds of questions that he's going to be thrilled to answer for us. Let me tell you a little bit about Ruth Anderson. Ruth is a native of the Alaskan Village. She spent her early years in Minnesota and received both her graduate and undergraduate degrees from the universities of Minnesota and Kansas. For 20 years, Ruth has served in the U.S. Air Force Nurse Corps. At Hickman Air Force Base in Hawaii, she served as squadron commander and chief nurse. Since retiring from the Air Force, she has spent many years heading up global humanitarian missions and continues that work even today. Ruth and her husband, Richard, have lived in Prince William County for the past 20 years. She served on the County Board of Supervisors, representing the Occoquan District for 3 years. During that time, she chaired the Potomac-Rappahannock Transportation Commission, AKA OmniRide. In addition, she served on the board of directors for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, as well as the Virginia Association of Counties. She's the proud mother of 3 and prouder grandmother of 7. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for tonight and our program manager for this particular program, Ruth Anderson.
All right, thank you very much, Cynthia. And this is an excellent night where we can get to know our new police chief. And we are so happy to have you on our program tonight. I'm going to give a brief introduction because I don't want to take too much time away from your talking to us and a few questions that we're going to have, but I'm going to read a little bit of his great biography. Chief Peter Newsham was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and grew up in Weymouth, Massachusetts. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the College of Holy Cross and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Maryland School of Law. He has attended numerous police executive trainings and was actively involved in the Major Cities Chiefs Association and the Police Executive Research Forum. He also attended the Anti-Defamation League's training on law and society and the League's National Counterterrorism Seminar in Israel. In 1989, Chief Newsham joined the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., where he served in several operational assignments and leadership positions before being named Chief of Police in 2016. Chief Newsham retired from the Metropolitan Department in January 2021. He now leads the Prince William County Police Department as the 5th police chief since its inception in 1970. The department has a budget of over $113 million and a full-time staff with close to 900 sworn and civilian members. He is leading this department in our county, Prince William County, the 2nd largest county in the Commonwealth of Virginia. A diverse community of nearly 500,000 residents and stretching about 350 square miles. Chief, congratulations on becoming our new chief of police. You have stepped into this vital position during a tough time in the history of our country, our Commonwealth, and our county. You assumed this leadership position amidst a pandemic, political unrest, economic uncertainty, and cries for defunding of police departments across the nation. We are looking forward to hearing about your position, your goals, and even your concerns as you speak to us tonight. There's a few things we've asked you to include in your opening remarks, so we'd like to hear something about your main goals, your concept of community policing, public safety issues. I know that speeding is something that supervisors get constant calls about, and maybe a little something about that new law where we're not supposed to use devices at all while driving. And then something about the legalization of marijuana in Virginia, perception of police reform, and how the new commission, the Racial and Social Justice Commission, may be helpful. And if there's time, maybe comment on the Explorer program, its usefulness in recruiting and maybe increasing diversity in the department, and the co-responder program. What problems do you think this will solve for our county? Then we'd like to save at least 15 minutes for questions for those who have joined us tonight. And with that, on behalf of the Prince William Committee of 100, I welcome Chief Peter Newsham. The floor is yours.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for that very gracious introduction. It was very kind of you. And what I have come to know of the Prince William County Committee of 100, this apparently is a group, if I understand it correctly, who gets together and discusses some of the significant issues that are occurring in our community. And they think about solutions that they can push forward to make Prince William County a better place to live. And I got to say, that's a nice group to be a part of, and thank you all for doing that. I think we need more people in our community thinking about solutions to some of these significant problems that we're facing. So thank you all for participating in this group. So I will start. I have been asked frequently since I've joined the Prince William County Police Department why I came to Prince William County, and the answer to that question is really pretty simple. And the answer to that question is why not? You have a beautiful county. When I saw the position open, I applied for the position. It was very attractive to me. I knew of Prince William County Police Department's reputation as being a very well-run agency. And the thing that really sold the job to me is when I went to an interview with your Board of County Supervisors, and I got to speak to each of them individually. They asked me a number of questions. And what struck me about that conversation was they all, as you know your county probably a lot better than I do, but they all come from different perspectives. But each and every single one of them seemed to be, their primary concern seemed to be the county and what they could do to make Prince William County a better place. And for me, that sold it. I felt like that was a group of folks that I could work with. My main goals here as the chief is, number one, is to continue to build trust between the police department and the community that we serve. I know you hear that from chiefs of police all the time, but it is the most essential ingredient for effective policing in a community is to have trust and legitimacy. Trust is in the eye of the beholder. So we certainly have folks in Prince William County who have no problem in trusting the police, but the truth be told, we also have folks in our county who do not trust the police. And what we need to do on the police department is every single day, we need to build those relationships. I look at it as making deposits into a trust bank. And in the event that something happens, a crisis occurs within one of our communities, that when the Prince William County Police arrive, that everybody who's there feels comfortable and they can trust the officers that come to assist them. Another one of my goals is to build diversity within the Prince William County Police Department. That was an ask of almost all of the Board of County Supervisors. Your police department right now is not as diverse as your county, and I think it has to be. I think that's a core ingredient for police departments and for policing. One of the reasons I believe that is I believe every kid who grows up in Prince William County, I would like for them to look at a police officer and see somebody who looks like them. And hopefully one day they will say, I want to be a Prince William County police officer. So that's why I think diversity is one of the reasons diversity is important. The other reason diversity is important is because, we all have implicit biases. We all have different life experiences. And it's really important that you have people in your agency, regardless, it doesn't even have to be in policing, that understand those differences, and we can share those differences and work collectively as a group. A third thing I want to try and do is find efficiencies within the work that we're doing. Prince William County is growing, and it's growing at a pretty quick pace. You have a lot of folks that are understanding that Prince William County is a place where they want to live, and they're moving into the county pretty quickly. And one of the things that's going to require is that we do everything we possibly can with the resources that we are given. There's always going to be restrictions. There's always going to be limitations on budgets. And so when we're policing, I want to make sure that we're doing in the most efficient way. Two other things that are critical right now in policing that I think that I want to ensure that this police department is ready for. We all were here in 2020. We saw a lot of the national conversation surrounding policing and the calls for police reform. And police reform has begun in the state of Virginia. We can look at some of the legislation that recently passed in Richmond. And my goal is to ensure that this agency is ready and prepared to accept and embrace the reforms that come from the state and any other reforms that might come from the county, because there is a culture within policing. There will be some that will be resistant to change, and change can be uncomfortable. Those of you who've ever had to be involved in a significant change, doing something different. Human beings are creatures of habit. And whenever we're asked a human being to do something differently, it's uncomfortable. But I want to make sure that this agency is prepared, that they're nimble, and they embrace the reforms that come, because at the end of the day, those reforms are things that our community as a whole has asked for. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we abide by those reforms. The last piece that I want to ensure is I want to ensure that you have a police department that is healthy. And when I say healthy, they need to be healthy not only physically, but they need to be healthy mentally and spiritually. If you have employees that are working in this business for any period of time, they are exposed to a lot of trauma. And in a police leadership position, we have a responsibility to ensure that we have a workforce that is healthy. And if you do have a workforce that's healthy, in all likelihood, you're going to be able to be in a better position to serve your community in a positive way. The other topics that I've been asked to discuss, of course, are the legalization of marijuana in the state of Virginia, and it's moving towards that. We went through decriminalization of marijuana in Washington, D.C. I can talk about this as a police chief, and I can talk about it personally. I'm a baby boomer, so I'm not a big fan of legalization of marijuana. Pete Newsham, the person. As a law enforcement officer, I have seen how marijuana has been, the marijuana laws have been disproportionately applied to some of our communities, our less fortunate communities. And so I do think that something has to change with regards to enforcement of marijuana. And I will ensure that the Prince William County Police Department abides by that. Community policing was another topic I was asked to touch on. Community policing, in my mind, is really boils down to one thing, and that is respect. And we need to ensure that when our police officers are policing in our community, when they come across somebody, regardless of their circumstance, that every single person is treated with respect. And I also think that it's critical for our police officers to have self-awareness, particularly in today's day and age, where most of the things that police officers do are captured on video. And so when I talk about self-awareness, our officers need to realize how they look when they are out in the community. And they always want to present an image whereby anybody who's watching looks at the police officers as they are the good guys, and they're the people that are doing the right thing. And that's, in a nutshell, that's what community policing is. We need to communicate with our community. We need to develop strategies for policing in our communities. We need to treat folks with respect, and we need to have self-awareness when we're out there policing in our communities. The Racial and Social Justice Commission, the one thing that I will say about that, the commission was established by the Board of County Supervisors before I arrived. What I was very thankful to hear about the commission was that they included the police department in the conversation. Some communities are not doing that, and I think that that's a mistake. I don't think the police should be there to drive the conversation, but I do think it's critically important that people who are members of the commission understand the role of the police and some of the things that the police department are doing. I think a lot of the things that are being said about some police departments across the country are being said because of misinformation. And I think that if we're going to do this correctly in Prince William County, we need to have all the facts, and we need to move forward with accurate information as opposed to perception or supposition. So that's what I will say. I can take any questions about the commission that anybody might have. I was asked to talk about our Explorer program. So this is a program for young people who are in high school between the ages of 14 and 20. Actually, when they reach the age of 18, we ask them, or we try to convince them to join our cadet program. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the kids who join the program, the young people in high school, what they do is they meet twice a month with the police department. In one of those meetings, we will give them a presentation on something we're doing in policing. And then in the second meeting of the month, they will be involved in kind of some hands-on, they'll get hands-on exposure to all facets of police work. And really what it does is it really gives young people who may have an inclination to be involved in policing, they give them some experience about what the police really do. And oftentimes you can get folks who are explorers that will matriculate into becoming cadets. Our cadets are actually paid at the police department. They work as paid employees for the police department, and they work there until they're 21. And when they're 21, they're able to become police officers. And I do think that that's an excellent pipeline for getting young people who are interested in policing to join the police department. So I think it's very valuable. One of the things that makes recruiting difficult in policing is that although you only need a high school education to join the Prince William County Police Department, there is an age requirement that you're 21. And most, as you know, most kids get out of school around 18 years of age. There's about a 3-year gap there. And that's why the cadet program was developed, so we could bring young people on board that were interested in policing, people from the county, and have them matriculate into becoming police officers. The co-responder program, I was asked to talk a little bit about that. I can't take credit for that. That's something that was established here in Prince William County before I got here. The co-responder program is a program where mental health professionals respond to calls with the police department the calls for service that involve people who are having a mental health crisis. And the idea behind that program is to have somebody who has expertise in handling mental health crisis on the scene to be able to assist the police or take the lead role, if necessary, in de-escalating the situation to ensure that a person who's in crisis, somebody who's having a mental health crisis, is being able to take safely and respectfully into a treatment program. That's something that police departments across the country are moving to. Prince William County, to their credit, has established this program, and I think it's going to pay dividends. We want to make sure that when we are handling folks in our community, or we're responding to calls for service in our community for people who are in mental health crisis, that we don't harm them. And the best way to do that is to have the best experts on the scene to assist people. One of the things I will say about this is that I don't think the community really has an appreciation of how often police officers are dealing with folks who have mental health issues. It happens on a very regular basis. Since I started in February 1st, we've had a number of scenes where police officers were able to go in. They were able to diffuse a situation where somebody was in crisis, and they were able to get that person safely into treatment. One of the examples is we had a police officer who went into a home where a young man was in crisis. The young man had actually pulled out a knife and was holding the knife to his own throat. And of course, there was a lot of concern that that young man was going to either injure himself or even at worst take his own life. Police officers spent a number of hours there talking to this young man. They were able to de-escalate the situation, and they were able to safely get that young man into treatment. So those are the types of success stories people often don't hear. But with this co-responder program, I think we'll have a lot more of those interactions in our community. I will talk why I've got all of you listening about recruiting, and I talked about this at the beginning, trying to ensure that our police department is more diverse than it currently is. I truly believe I'm going to need help from the community. Policing in 2020 got a black eye, to say the least. And a lot of our young people, particularly our young people of color, are not interested in joining policing for a lot of reasons. And so what I would say to our community is that if you know young people who are service-minded, try and point them in the direction of some of these programs, this Explorer program, our cadet program. Learn as much as you can about the Prince William County Police Department. It will offer young people, I can tell you from my personal experience, I joined the police department when I was 25 years old. It's been the most rewarding experience of my life. I loved it from the very first day that I joined in 1989 up until my last day in Washington, D.C. on June 2nd. And then beginning on February 1st, every single day has been a pleasure in this work. And I think young people need to hear those stories. A lot of our young people in our community think that the police are what they see on TV or what they see in the news. Nothing could be further from the truth. Policing is a service profession, and we spend a large majority of our day helping folks. We help folks who are injured. We get them to the hospital. We help folks who are involved in car crashes. We help families who have a loved one who has gone missing. And we respond every single day to victims of crime. And we do our very best to getting to the bottom of that. So if you know a young person that's service-minded, they want to be part of the change here in Prince William County, they want to join a agency with an excellent reputation, then we're hiring. We'd love to have them. So there was another point that I didn't touch on, and I want to touch on real briefly, the conversation about speeding and handheld devices. My thoughts on that are pretty simple. Speed, impaired driving, whether it be holding a handheld device, whether it be somebody who's under the influence of either drugs or alcohol, is extremely, extremely dangerous. And so everything we possibly can do to prevent people from being injured or, God forbid, killed in car accidents, we are going to do. So I think it's our responsibility as a police agency to ensure that we are preventing people from speeding, ensuring that people, when they do get behind the wheel of a vehicle, that they're paying full time and attention. And so that's how I personally feel about that. I feel it's our responsibility to handle those issues. So I don't know how long I have gone on, but I did want to leave a significant amount of time for any questions that you all have. So we can open up for any questions that anyone has for me.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your beginning remarks. You did hit everything on our list, and we appreciate that. I just want to follow up on a couple of those points before I go to some questions. We do have some questions coming in. I wanted to follow up on the co-responder program. What has and I love that program actually, because in our neighborhood we've had a couple of incidents where as a nurse and someone that's very involved in the community, I knew that it would be best to have a mental health individual along with the police. I've known that for years. But what is it doing to staffing? What does that look like for you and staffing?
So the staffing for the co-responder unit in Prince William County has actually been an addition to current staffing. So it hasn't negatively impacted staffing. And you know, what we believe, and we truly believe this. So a part of the co-responder program is to respond to calls, but a more important part of the co-responder program is outreach to people who are chronically touching the criminal justice system, not because they're criminals, but because they have a mental health issue. And sometimes if you can nip that in the bud and get through outreach, get a hold of those folks and get them into treatment, you can prevent them from being introduced into the criminal justice system. So, you know, our theory is, and this, you know, remains to be seen, is that if we really build this program in the right way, we can actually reduce calls for service if we can get through outreach, get people into treatment that are constantly touching the criminal justice system. So hopefully that's the case. You know, we'll have to analyze it and collect the data, but I think it's going to be a win-win as far as one of the efficiencies that I talked about a little bit earlier.
All right, thank you. And I wanted to follow up on one other thing too, and the issue of speeding. And I know things changed during the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, residential speeding was a huge thing. And it was because of staffing that we can't have a police car on every corner and watching every area that has consistent speeding. And the pandemic, I think, probably slowed some of that down. But are you bringing with you any novel, unique ways to deal with residential speeding?
So I'm probably going to get half the people on the call angry at me when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are in a world where technology exists through speed cameras that can address that issue on a much larger scale in a county of this size with a population as big as we have it through the speed enforcement cameras. And Richmond has just passed, from what I understand, legislation allowing that in work zones and around our schools, which is a start. But I would say, and like I said, I know there will be a lot of people who disagree with me on this. This is my opinion on this, that if you really want to have the ability to impact the speeding in our communities, particularly in our neighborhoods, in a large scale way in a county of this size with this many people, you're really going to have to move towards automated enforcement.
All right. Well, opinions change. I know that's been an issue and very contentious for actually a couple decades almost in our county. All right. Here are some questions that are coming in. Number one, what reforms will be mandated by the state, and what reforms will you institute in Prince William County?
So there's already been some movement on reform by the legislature here in the state of Virginia. One of them is surrounding the service of search warrants. There's particularly search warrants that occur in people's homes. So there's been some restrictions placed on that. There's been some restrictions on the types of stops that police officers can make, the type of traffic stops that they can make. What they have done is a number of the violations, they have made them They're not a primary offense, which means that police officers can't pull people over for mechanical violations. That is a change. And the idea, the concept behind that change is to prevent police officers from profiling folks. There's a body of research out there that would suggest that oftentimes police officers are using those types of violations for pretextual stops to do other things, and it's having a disproportionate impact on communities of color. So that was a change. You know, the reforms that I'm going to work on for Prince William County is going to be primarily around use of force, making sure, unfortunately, in policing, from time to time, we do have to use force. And I want to make sure that the police officers in Prince William County are 100% prepared to do that in a safe and a respectful way. And what that will require is that they're involved in scenario-based training on a very regular basis. I am a true believer, because it happens so infrequently in a police officer's career, that they have to be thinking about it before it happens. And the way you think about that is through scenario-based training. One of the really good things about Prince William County Police Department is you have your own training facility in the county. A lot of police agencies in the state of Virginia do not have that luxury. So we will be taking full advantage of that to ensure, like I said, in the event that our police officers are put into a position where they're going to need to use force, that they do it in a safe and respectful way. So that'll be one of the significant things that I will work on.
All right, and I know other things are coming down the pike too. Here's a question. Do you support gun control?
I support, I can tell you my experience with guns is that in Washington, D.C., we had very, very strict gun laws in the District of Columbia. And where I sat as the chief of police, we very rarely had problems with legal gun owners. And legally possessed guns were not an issue in the District of Columbia. It was illegally possessed guns that created a lot of issues for the police department in the district. And so I say all that to say is that the police department doesn't decide on what restrictions a community will have on their ability to possess a gun. That is a decision that's made by our legislators. But I can tell you, I haven't had in my career, 31 years, a problem with legally owned guns. So my position on it is that it's within the priority or the prerogative of our legislature to make the rules, and we will enforce them.
All right, thank you, Chief. Here's a slightly different topic. What protections do officers have for reporting other officers who are overly aggressive?
So that's an excellent question. I'm glad somebody asked that. One of the things that they began teaching in Prince William County, and I believe it's critically important, is what's called a duty to intervene. And that what that is if a police officer sees another police officer involved in a misuse of force in particular, but also involved in any type of misconduct, they have a responsibility to report it. And if they don't, then they can be held accountable just as much as the person who's involved in the bad behavior. And so what you need to accomplish in a police agency is, like the question asked, is you need to have an environment where people feel very comfortable in the agency reporting misconduct when they see it. And that's an environment I haven't really been able to get a sense. I mean, one of the things I have learned about the Prince William County Police Department, it's a little over 50 years old. And one of the bedrock principles that it was built upon was honesty and integrity. And you can ask anybody who works for this agency about honesty, and they will tell you that you have to be honest or you will lose your job. And that's a great place to start. And so I want to ensure that we have an environment here where everybody feels comfortable in the event they see somebody who's involved in particularly mistreating somebody in our community, that they feel comfortable reporting it. So that's a great question. We are training our folks on that. And that's one of the things I'll be looking very carefully at.
All right, and I'm going to ask a question, and this is turning into a follow-up question because you already addressed community policing, but there's a couple folks that want you to dig just a little bit deeper in terms of what your plans are. I think what we were used to over the past few years was the chief going around to the different district areas and having conversations with the chief and you know, having some community meetings, and I know you've already done that and you're doing it tonight. But what steps, one of the questions is, what steps will you take to implement the concept of treating people with respect among police officers?
Yeah, so, you know, first of all, to the first part of your question is whether or not I'm going to be out in the community. I 100% am. It's one of you know, I think it's one of the best parts of the job is getting out and meeting and talking to the people who live, work, and visit Prince William County. One of our responsibilities, and one of my responsibilities as the chief, is to listen to folks and listen to what they have to say. And you know, those listening sessions are a big part of community policing. If we're not listening to what our community is saying and adjusting accordingly, we're not going to be successful. I mean, you can't dictate policing. That it's just not going to work. So you know, will I be out there? Will I be at the community meetings? Absolutely. There was a second part to your question too.
Well, it has to do with respect, treating people with respect. You know, what
Oh,
have
yeah.
you done to try to move that concept into the DNA of the officers?
So I've gone to each of the roll calls, and to get out to all the patrol officers, you have to go to 18 different roll calls. There's 18 different squads across the police department. And in each and every one of those roll calls, I told them that there was two things that we were not going to tolerate on the Prince William County Police Department. The two things we're not going to tolerate was not going to tolerate excessive force. That is a non-starter. And secondly, we're going to treat everybody with respect. So I have already had that conversation with all of the patrol officers. One of the really kind of things that struck me about your police department here in Prince William County as being very impressive is that every 2 years, the police department does a community survey where they ask the community how they feel about their police department. The way the survey is structured is really to get a sense from all of Prince William County. As I said at the very beginning, there are definitely folks within our community who are not very trustful of the police, and we're not going to ignore that because of this survey. But what I will say is that the police department receives very high marks in those surveys. They're in the 90-something percentile of approval across the Prince William County community. And what I would say about that is that that's not a switch that you can just turn on. That is something that takes day in and day out proper treatment of your community to receive those kind of grades. And like I said, the other piece is we can't, rest on our laurels and say, okay, we're a great police department because of that survey, because that's not true. What we need to do in our outreach is we really need to identify those groups, and you can do that through the listening sessions, those groups who are not so trustful of the police, and then see what we can do to mend those fences, to build bridges with those communities. So that'll be a big part of what I will try to do while I'm here. And I consider it, like I said, I think it's one of the more fun things that we get to do as a chief of police.
All right. Thank you for that. It is amazing the scores that we've had over the years in such a county that is growing rapidly. So one quick question, do you still have the ride along program? And
We
who
do.
is
Oh, yeah.
eligible?
and that brought a thought to mind, which I will talk about. It was anybody is eligible to be involved in the ride along program. The one thing that has created a problem with the ride along program is COVID. So we're probably, I don't know if they're doing it right now. I don't think they are, because I know with our new hires, it's been suspended until COVID gets lifted. But the program will be up and running. The other thing they have, and that will be up and running again after COVID, is they have a Citizens Police Academy. And for people who want to learn more about the Prince William County Police Department, I would urge you to be involved in that. We had a Citizens Police Academy in Washington, D.C., and it really gives you a sense as to all of the things that the police department does. It gives you kind of a glimpse at the training that police officers go through. And it really provides a lot of factual information that a lot of folks in our community just frankly don't have. So
Right.
if somebody's interested in a ride along, as soon as COVID is lifted, we'll be up and running again.
Okay. And one thing that I learned when I did a ride along maybe 4 years ago or so, the thing that struck me was the different languages that the police have to deal with. It became very visual for me. And that's part of the diversity in our county, and it does have something to do with community policing too. And what kind of technology or how are you dealing with the different languages?
So we have some officers on the police department who are able to translate for us. One of the devices we had in Washington, D.C. Was we had a tool where we could call into a language line, and you could get a licensed interpreter to get on the phone and actually interpret what somebody is saying to the police. So that's a tool. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, if they have that here in Prince William. Now that you've mentioned it, I'll go back and take a look. It's a tool we should have. The point you raise is it's such a, has anybody who's traveled out of this country into a place where they do not speak English, think about being in that setting and think about having to have an emergency where you needed to report something to the police and you were unable to communicate. And that's what we have with some of our residents in Prince William County. And that's a critical issue that if we're going to build trust, that's one of the critical pieces that we have to have.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for checking into that. We're back to gun control. Someone has a question. How will you work with county and state legislation to reduce the number of illegal guns, especially the AR-15?
So, I think that one of the things that we have to do is, and I'm going to talk about illegal guns, illegal gun ownership. There's a lot of ways that policing can impact illegal gun ownership. A lot of guns get into the hands of criminals in what's called a straw purchase scenario. And what a straw purchase is somebody goes in and buys a handgun legally, and then they sell it to somebody, and then they report it either missing or stolen. So I do know in the state of Virginia that the Eastern District has been very aggressive in prosecuting those cases. What they're finding out is that oftentimes it's young women that are getting themselves involved in that circumstance, where oftentimes they're being manipulated by a male who wants a gun, and they're convincing them to go and get involved in this thing. But there are going to be serious penalties, because when you get that illegal, you get that gun, as soon as you make that straw purchase, it becomes illegal. And now you've got it into the hands of somebody like we had at the grocery store this week in Colorado. And God forbid, we do not want that happening in our community. And those are real fears. So I think we need to, the question was, what am I going to do to work with the legislature on addressing illegal guns getting into our community? I think that's one of the things we need to think about, is stiffening the penalty for straw purchases. For the folks that are involved in the business of selling firearms, we need to ensure that their businesses are secure, so that they can't be the victims of burglary where you ended up putting, you could put hundreds of guns out into the street with one burglary. So I think the source of guns into the state of Virginia and around our communities in the state of Virginia is the area where I think we can best address illegal guns.
All right, thank you. And I certainly agree with you. I don't want to turn the TV on any day and see that one of those incidents is happening here. We have another question about, officers and how you deal with them. And the question is, can you speak to the internal investigation process of officers relative to complaints or offenses? How many offenses or complaints before an officer is reprimanded?
It really depends on the circumstances. So there are certain offenses, like if it was an offense of excessive force, an offense of dishonesty, an offense of disrespecting someone, there would be more than a reprimand. There would be either a suspension or removal from the force. So that we would take those things very, very seriously. A more minor offense, it depends. And when I say a minor offense, there are a lot of rules in the business of policing. We have what's called general orders, and there's a lot of restrictions for a lot of really good reasons. And if an officer violates one of those more minor rules, then we may address it with training. And then if it repeats itself, then we'd have to get more serious and maybe move to a reprimand and then suspension or removal. So the answer to that question is really it's case specific. It's the nature of the offense. Dishonesty is a termination offense in the Prince William County Police Department. Excessive force will be a termination offense in the Prince William County Police Department. And I think, disrespecting anyone in our community should be treated extremely seriously for police officers. That's the way that I think about it. The good news is you do not have a police department where that type of thing is happening in a significant way. The amount of complaints that the internal affairs of the Office of Professional Responsibility gets is very small. And the other thing, and this is really important for the community to know, is that all of the patrol officers that are out in the community in Prince William County that work for the Prince William County Police Department are wearing body-worn cameras. So in the event you do get mistreated by a police officer, there should be a video record of that interaction. And we can go back and we can check to verify if you're mistreated. And if, like I said, if you're a police officer and you're mistreating somebody, it's going to be taken very seriously.
All right. One last question, and then we'll just ask you for some closing remarks. Staffing, you said you were hiring. What is it like right now? Like, how many do you need to meet the positions that you have right now available, the available positions?
Good question. So the police department should be staffed at about 700 officers. And then we have about 180 professional staff. And then we have 95 part-time employees. In each of those groups, we're not fully staffed. Actually, in the professional staff arena, we're closest to being fully staffed. There's only a couple positions open there. In the sworn police officers rank, I think it's 31 was the last number. We're below our 700 authorized strength. We will be bringing in a class of new recruits in July. Prince William County does that twice a year. And what they do is they bring in twice a year, they bring in folks to address attrition. So we do have resignations, we have retirements, and we have separations from time to time. And so that the police department's on a regular basis, continuously replenishing itself up to the sworn staffing of 700. So we say 700 sworn, oftentimes it'll dip below that, and then we replenish it twice a year when we hire new recruits.
All right, thank you very much. It's been my privilege to be the moderator tonight, and I really want to welcome you to Prince William County. I certainly like what I'm hearing. I think all of us have about your efforts in community policing, especially, and so many other things that you are dealing with. I want to turn this over before you say maybe some closing remarks, but I'm going to turn it over to our president, Cynthia, to see if she has any additional question for you. But again, thank you for spending this evening with us.
Well, thank you. You're very kind.
Thank you, Ruth. Chief, I have one question I'd like to ask you, and that is, what is your current attrition rate? One for, well, it's a two-part question. What is the percentage of female and or African-American officers that you have? And the second part of the question is, what is your attrition rate? And how does that rate relate to the various ethnic groups?
Yeah, so I'm going to go through the current diversity of the department, and forgive me if I get any of these numbers wrong because I don't have them in front of me. But the county right now, and like I said, and I'm going to be as close as I can, I want to say is 42% Caucasian. It's 23.5% Latino, and it's 20% African American. So that's, and this is, I'm taking this off of a presentation I just did last week. So like I said, forgive me if these numbers are not entirely accurate. And then with regards to the police department, we are only at 14% female. And if we're going to meet the demographic of our community, we should be 50% female. So if you know any young women who are interested in joining one of the best police departments in the country, we're hiring. The other groups are, I want to say, our Latino officers are running, and our African-American officers are both running in the neighborhood a little bit over 10% of the police department. And the Caucasian officers is running around 72%. Okay. So there's work to be done to ensure that our police department reflects the diversity of the community that we serve. And that's going to be, like I said, that's going to be, when I say it's going to be a goal, it's going to be a goal not only of mine, but it's going to be a goal of the committee of 100 to assist Chief Newsham in getting young people of color interested in policing in our county.
I heard your response a minute ago where you said if you know any young females that are looking to be recruited. Does that mean that we baby boomers are excluded?
We're good until we're good in Prince William until we reach the age of 70, and there's a mandatory retirement for police at the age of 70. But you look like you got a couple decades at least left, so we're hiring if you're interested.
Chief, that'll get you at least a cup of coffee, okay? My last question is with regard to the diversity commission that you are a member of. What do you think are the top overall objectives of that commission?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there was some presentations the other night by the police, by the county executive, by the school system. One of the big questions was really the diversity, not only of the police department, but of our educators and of our county as a whole. I think drawing attention to that is going to be really important in the county. There's conversation about, a lot of conversation about equity. The county just hired a woman, and she's actually, I got to meet with her the other day, Miss Burgess, and she's really kind of understands equity, implicit bias, some of the issues that have, I think, systemically held folks back in our community. And I really, it's really kind of impressive for me anyways to listen to the discussion. So I don't think I'm exactly answering your question, but I do think that all of those issues are going to be discussed, and I think they're going to pull out of those discussions some real world effective recommendations for the board on how we can be in a better place in Prince William County with regards to equity and inclusion. I think that the conversation probably has not gone on here in Prince William County, not in a way that it's going on now. So I think that I'm very excited about where the commission is going. The leadership on the commission, the woman who's running the commission, I've sat and met with her, very impressed with her and her leadership ability. So we will see where it goes. I'm optimistic that there's going to be some, there's going to be some growing pains as we go through this, because some of these discussions are difficult. Some of the folks that are, involved in this business in the county are going to be defensive at times, but everybody seems to have a healthy respect for each other. And I really, truly believe that some significant recommendations for making Prince William County a more equitable and inclusive county are going to come out of it. So did that help? Did that help answer your question?
It does. So is the idea that the commission will look across all organizations within the county for?
It's got three areas it's got to look at. It's going to look at policing. It's going to look at the county government. It's going to look at the school systems, and it's going to look at equity and inclusion for those three groups. And that's why we had the presentations by those three groups. And I do believe that, there may be, when the work is done, and that's a lot of work, as you can imagine, that's a heavy lift. But I would imagine when they're done that they'll probably move on to some other areas in the county.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's the end of my questions. We're right at the time we said we would close out. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your openness and your honesty in giving us answers to some pretty tough questions. I know that your day consists of tough situations and questions. We thank you for the openness with which you've handled this presentation. I personally think that this effort you're making to come out to the communities and let communities hear you and see you will make a great deal of difference for that trust that we asked about and that you talked about specifically. We're hoping that we'll be able to have you with us. I'd like to have you with us, let's say in 6 months, and let's measure you up against the goals that you have in place. Let's see how you stack up against those, if you're willing.
I think that's fair, and I would love to come back and we can discuss how much progress we've made, and we can also discuss any other significant issues that come up along the way. And you've been very gracious in inviting me. I will always make myself available, and I got to tell you, I've been tested a little bit up in Washington, D.C. with difficult questions. So I want folks who are listening to feel very comfortable. And if you have a difficult question, please ask it. Because we're not going to get to the bottom of these issues unless we have communication and we discuss them. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Chief, and
Yep.
Good night to you. Committee of 100 members, if you'll hang with me for just a few minutes, we're going to close out for everyone else. I'd like to say to our members, Chief, anytime you're ready to sign out is just fine.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good night.
I'd like to say to our members that we certainly would like to have greater participation with our members, with our board of directors, with our executive committee. I, for one, feel that the amount of work that goes into these presentations is not met by participation among our members and our board members and our program members and everyone else. I, for one, would like to see much greater participation from all of you. We sent notes out to, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 times. And one of the most surprising things about tonight has been the low participant rate. I can't explain it to save me. We thought this might be a topic that lots of folks from the community would have an interest in, quite frankly, because the police chief and the work of the police department affect every single one of us on a day-to-day basis. If you've got ideas that you can present to us that will make our programs more fulfilling, more rewarding, more meaningful, we are certainly interested in looking at that and seeing that. We are always open for topics. Our topic for the next time we're together is the rural crescent. That's what we said we were going to attack next. If you have something that you think is more pressing than the rural crescent, I'd be delighted to have you forward that to me. We'll take a look at it. Ruth, I want to thank you so much for putting the program together for us. I know it was a lot of work, a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages, and you have been wonderful at completing this assignment for us. Mike Beatty, I know you're in Rhode Island someplace, and in spite of the long distance, you are here with us, and we thank you for that. And I don't have any other comments. Do you guys? Is there anything that you guys would like to share before we part?
Oh, I'm thinking that, you know, by the time we were able to have this program, he'd already had several programs in the community.
Yeah.
And that might explain, you know, some of the low participation.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot going on with police. So
yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. I do know that he's been out quite a bit. I don't know how many of our typical folks have been, involved in those presentations that he's made, but I certainly do feel that he was generous with his time. He was forthcoming with most of his responses. So I think all in all, Ruth, it's really been for me, it's been a great program. And thank you so much for your effort.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Mike, you got anything? You're on mute.
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. How long are you going to be in Rhode Island?
I'm due to fly out on Saturday, April 17th.
Okay, great. Okay, all. Well, thank you so much.
Good night.
We appreciate it.